As we build our business and grind to get things moving, we don't always have the processes and procedures in place to make things smooth, to make things efficient, to make things easy. And as we grow our business, we stay with those same old processes that got us started. And a habit we can fall into is we fall in love with how hard things are versus the value of our product. We see the value of our product in how hard it is to deliver versus the delivery or the quality or the on-time delivery of the product we're doing. It's a chaos cycle, and today we're going to learn how to break the chaos cycle. Welcome to the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, where we cover the issues that help owners scale their small business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire Solutions, and I'm going to be your host today. Our guest today is Aaron Trahan, and he's the founder and a coach at Performance Mindset Coaching. It's a professional business coaching practice focused on implementing proven operating systems that enhance effectiveness where it matters the most. Prioritization, focus, execution, and accountability. A few facts about Aaron. He's got 20 years of executive leadership experience. He's a nationally recognized business coach, and he's a husband and father of two boys, ages 3 and 5. Lots of fun. Matt, let's bring on Aaron. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, Corey. Great to be here.
Great having you. You're just up the road from us in Austin.
That's right. In the capital of Texas.
The capital of Texas, yeah. Very cool. How are things going up there? Is it raining up there right now? It's rainy down here.
You know, today is going to be a tale of 2 days. It kind of started very rainy, tornado watches and all that. And now as we look into the back half of the afternoon, we've got clear blue skies. So I've got a dog walk on the agenda shortly after this. So
very cool. Well, we have the shitty part of that forecast all day and into tomorrow and potentially into Thursday morning as well. So
yeah, that's how it goes.
Cool. So you do some coaching, and it's mindset coaching, which is very cool. You heard me do the intro about, my uneducated, zero fact-based theory is that people fall in love with the pain instead of the product. I just made that up. That's pretty handy. I'm going to TM it. And so I'm interested to have a conversation about that today. But before we get into it, maybe if you just give us a little background on, mindset coaching and where it came from and how it came to be.
Yeah. As you mentioned in your opening, I've had almost 2 decades of executive leadership experience. I've been on the inside of a business as a leader that has scaled from 200 million in annual revenue to over $1 billion, but we scaled and grew in all the wrong ways. And a lot of that growth had to have been unwound to recalibrate, re-foundationalize the business. And, over the years, I continue to see what I experienced in that business and in other businesses happening all over the place. And that is once high growth businesses that grow too quick, too fast, without the right systems in place to be able to effectively manage that growth that actually can turn it into scale, only for a lot of those businesses to collapse under the weight of inefficient, unsustainable growth. And so as I launched into my own practice, I wanted to create a system to help businesses implement that solves a lot of the pain points that I personally experienced and avoid some of the organizations acquiring the same scars that I did, with being able to allow them to benefit from those lessons.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's jump in. We always like to kind of start with some definitions, and we're talking about breaking the chaos cycle today. So, let's define what is the chaos cycle. What are we talking about?
Yeah. So this really starts with a kind of a reality shattering event for a lot of business leaders, whether you're an owner, founder, CEO of a small and medium-sized business. everybody always thinks if I can just grow to a certain level, get my revenue here, everything would get easier, right? If I could just get that big,
Right.
everything gets easier. But when you grow the wrong way, the reality shattering event is that everything gets harder when that growth is unsustainable. And really what I see over and over again is a cycle that gets created. And so it's kind of not a virtuous cycle, but more of a vicious cycle that always starts with priority mismanagement. That's the root cause or the starting foundational point where the cycle starts to begin. And you can see that show up in a lot of different ways, whether it's a unclear strategy, you're trying to be in everything to everybody, you're chasing after all kinds of revenue opportunities that appear to be low-hanging fruit. And then that takes us to the second stage of the cycle. So when priorities are being mismanaged or they're unclear or there's just flat out too many, what happens next? Scattered organizational focus. It's almost kind of like focus being that glass jar that gets dropped on the ground and scatters in a million different pieces.
Right. Yeah.
Which then takes us to the third phase. So whenever there's priority mismanagement that then leads to scattered organizational focus, weak and inconsistent execution is the byproduct. It always shows up. And that's where we then finish the cycle, is that when that happens, execution's inconsistent, performance is not where the leaders want it to be. What do they then do? We're all human. We want to do something about it. We want to have that bias for action. So we launch a new slate of priorities to fix the things that aren't working. That then just makes the flywheel start spinning faster. Now the organization has more priorities to deal with. Your teams and employees feel like,
right,
the leadership team is launching new priorities every single week, and the cycle then starts to repeat itself.
This is a familiar message, right? It's the slow down to go faster. It's the take more, focus on fewer things. Tell me if you agree, or if you agree. I always kind of say when time is your only input, the only way we can grow is to work longer and work harder. You got a broken system. You've outgrown the system. And in fairness, we're talking to business owners $5 to $25 million a year. When you bootstrap a business or you don't have the VC backing, like 99% of small businesses that start, right? If you're going into a brick and mortar or doing whatever you're doing, the priority is never, let's start with some really solid process and procedure and build from there. We have an idea. Let's see if it works. Oh, it worked. Now we got to produce. Let's start to produce. And then to me, that's kind of how you start a business most times, right? So we're always, business owners are playing from behind until they hit that, like you said, that critical moment where they go, okay, here it is. We've hit the wall, and we can either keep banging into it and see what happens, or we can tear this down and rebuild it for scale. Is that an accurate analogy?
Yeah, I think so. And it speaks to the big counterintuitive truth that so many businesses unfortunately find out too late. That is, to scale and to scale successfully and efficiently is not about doing more. It's not about adding this new product line, going and launching in new territories or whatever it may be. Sure, there needs to be some of that at some point in time, but the businesses that always crack the code to efficiently scale, they actually do fewer things, and they do them exceptionally well with relentless consistency that you can then process and operationalize around. But
right,
when you're trying to do too much, that's where a lot of owners, founders, CEOs feel like there's just an ever increasing number of balls being thrown at them that they're having to juggle. Versus the companies that successfully scale may have those one or two that they've got repeatable, predictable, consistent systems that it's almost kind of like putting that Tesla in full self-drive mode, right? That's kind of what it looks like for a business that's super dialed in to the few things that gives them a competitive advantage that they can execute at a world-class level.
That's well said. That's really well said. So what are some, we might be moving into some mistakes. So what are some symptoms that you see of chaos?
Yeah, when I'm working with businesses and you can see it. You can walk in the room and there's almost that tension layer, right? Where the leadership team, they're working exceptionally hard. They all have goals. They're trying to do the right things, but they're not seeing an ROI on those efforts, right?
Right.
Those efforts are usually converted into what feels like day in, day out firefighting and just trying to survive the grind.
Right.
So when you grow the wrong way, the underlying chaos that's in the business will always grow at an exponentially faster rate than that top line revenue and bottom line performance. And I tell these businesses all the time, that chaos is just the business's way of screaming out, asking you, their leaders, for a couple things: better prioritization, better structure, and better systems. That chaos is just the business's language of saying, this is what I need more of.
Right.
And the way that I frame that to those leadership teams, those businesses, is I take them through a thought experiment. I normally ask the CEO, when's your leadership team meeting? When do you have that? Or when do you gather your managers or leaders on a weekly basis? And they tell me whatever time it is. And I'll say, great. Now let's think through something. What if I was to show up at that next leadership meeting unannounced? No one knew I was coming. There's nothing to prepare for, but I secretly go around the room and ask everybody in attendance the same couple questions. Number one, what are the top 2 or 3 priorities for the business? And then number 2, why are these priorities mission critical for the business right now? What would happen? I usually get about a 3 to 3.5 second pause, and then that's where the admittance comes in and says, well, you'd probably get several different answers from everyone in the room.
And I would imagine everyone would answer with the criticality around their department and the stuff they need to get done.
Bingo, which is an interpretation of them filling a void of what they perceive to be the biggest priority for the business right now through their lens of finance, through their lens of marketing, operations, sales, whatever it may be.
I got you.
And so I then have the CEO say, now zoom out. Think about if that's what's happening in your leadership team meeting. Think about the chaos that drives several layers below those leaders in the organization. Everybody may be, in fact, thinking that they're doing the right thing, going in the same direction, but you have effort harnessed in silos that may be completely disconnected from what the real prioritization or mission is. That's that in a nutshell is kind of what I typically see is kind of the leading root cause of how priority mismanagement happens, is that those independent operating silos within the business is filling that lack of clarity and that void from there not being clearly visible, transparent priorities around what are we doing in the short term that aligns with where we want to go over the long term.
Right. And so I think what I heard is you have a bunch of good, hardworking leaders doing what they think they should be doing to serve the business best. But everyone's thinking like that, but they're not aligned at all. So everyone's doing what they think is priority number one, and they're kind of just spraying all over the place versus a nice focused vision on, okay, are the activities I'm doing serving the company and our vision, or am I just doing them because that's what I think I should be doing?
That's exactly right. And I kind of like to drop it into an analogy that may be better able to understand from your audience, just from a visual standpoint. Is I kind of like to think about it as, think of one of those competitive row teams, right? You see those slick, long, competitive rowboats, and whether it's an Ivy League school or whoever, they're all in there. They're finely tuned, they're trained. Everybody knows what their role is in that one boat to row in the same direction towards a unified finish line.
Right.
Now, back to that scenario of what I asked the CEO about their leadership team, if everybody around that table said the exact same thing, that's what gives you that highly trained, finely tuned team in the same boat rowing in the same direction. But what the reality is, when everybody gives you different answers or the answers have a wide variety, it's like taking each rower out of that unified boat, putting everybody in their own single-seater rowboat, and even if they increased effort and energy by 5x, they will never be able to row as fast and make as much progress as that harnessed energy in the same boat. And that's exactly what it looks like in the business landscape or playing field.
Yeah, when you gave the analogy of like the rowing team, and you're going to say, or you could get, I was like, I envision old school. Like you get the guys from old school as your rowing team, or doing their best. You have Blue as the coxman,
That's right.
No, that's a great analogy, and I think clear is kind, and it's hard to say to people. Well, look, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have to assume it's hard for a leader, to break everything down, then say to his leadership team, I appreciate everything you're doing, but you got to stop. Here's what I want everyone to start working on. And so that leads us into the mistakes. We always like to talk about what can a business owner look for inside their own, if this is something they're feeling in their business, what are some of those amber flags, red flags, symptoms they can look for in their own business that they can go, oh, that's what he's talking about. That's what Aaron was talking about. Now, how can I pull back and start changing or fixing it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. And number one is the big C word, is communication. And I think especially for small businesses where there could be a lot of moving parts, everybody's trying exceptionally hard with a lot of effort to grow the business, scale the business. But I think at the end of the day, if you're the owner, the founder, or the CEO, when we think about what your top key performance indicator is, sure, revenue, profitability, maybe fundraising, shareholder relationships, all of that is very important. But I would argue the most important thing is communication. And that is ensuring that the most important thing for you, the owner, founder, CEO of a small business, is ensuring that the rest of your organization, no matter how big or small, knows day in and day out what the most important things to focus on are. And so a simple way to do this, ask. It's easy for us to get behind a podium once a month or once a quarter in an all hands meeting and say, this is the most important thing. But one of the biggest issues that I see leaders go through is thinking that, well, I checked my box. I did my job as the CEO. I communicated this, but a one and done approach to communication will never work. A lot of things happen during the day. And so I challenge CEOs to audit yourself from a communication standpoint. So if you think this is the most important thing, this is what you want to focus on over the next 30, 90 days, whatever it may be, go around the organization, audit yourself, ask your key leaders, how are they viewing what the most important thing is? What are they doing to make progress there? And how are they tracking that? And so when you can make the tracking, the measuring, and progress becomes wildly visible to everybody around those most important things, I think you close a massive gap. There's a pretty interesting study that was done that I like to share with a lot of founders, and I believe it was done by the High Performance Institute. And they surveyed 19,000 different leaders and cohorts of teams. And what they found was pretty interesting, is that it was all around goal setting and making sure that progress reporting was in place. And the cohort that didn't set any clear goals whatsoever performed just the same as the cohort that set clear goals, but had no tracking and reporting available to understand progress. So the big lesson here is communicating the goal is the first step. But if you don't have robust tracking and measuring systems in place, and when I say robust, this does not have to be some high-tech solution.
Right.
It's mostly around, do you have the pulse? Can you see the things that need to be measured and tracked on a week over week basis? Are they in place for everyone to see? Because if that's not there, setting your goal, maybe even communicating the goal, may not be enough.
So are you saying that that goal has to be visual? People need to be able to see it and track it and say, I'm on track, I'm off track?
I think yes, and they need to be able to answer the question at the end of each week. I'm a big believer in week over week reporting. Am I on track, at risk, or off track from where I need to be to this goal? And I think when you're asking what's typically missing or what's kind of the missing piece, if that's not there, that's usually going to be a symptom for goal achievement to be elusive and for progress to never meet expectations of the leadership team if those things aren't in place.
And you said goal achievement is elusive. I think a lot of people feel that way, and not intentionally, but we think we throw it out there. If you do this, I'll do this. And we think everyone understands that. And then when you speak with your people, like, well, I don't know how I'm being measured. I don't know what that is. And that goes back to your communication. What there's got to be stats around that, but how many times you have to say something before people actually hear it and have it register? And I mean, I know there's a scale there, because then you can say it enough and embed it in the culture enough, it becomes part of the vernacular, right? Everyone is saying it, everyone is doing it. But saying something one time is not considered effective communication. It's saying something one time. I think
right.
It's like 7 or 8 times or something you have to say it to someone before they actually hear what you're saying and go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand that.
A famous CEO put it this way. He says, around communication on priorities and the most important things is typically when you get sick and tired of saying it over and over again, that's usually when the rest of the organization finally starts to understand it.
Yeah.
So another way to think about that for you founders, owners, and CEOs out there, when it comes to priorities, goals, or milestones, if you're not just nauseous with how many times you've had to repeat it, that's probably a good indicator that it hasn't really sunk in with your team yet.
So you should be saying it in every conversation, essentially, right?
If it matters, you need to be able to communicate not only that it matters, but also why it matters. You then need to measure what you have decided that matters most to the organization, that then allows the organization to effectively manage what is being measured.
Right.
And so I kind of think about that as like, those are the big steps. You do those things well, I think you would be surprised of how much of your day-to-day management life starts to get a lot easier. Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're only managing 2 or 3 priorities and everyone understands what they are and is working to improve them. That's, I mean, it sounds commonsensical, but when you're in the heat of battle, you have a growing company and you got a new client, you got a new order. We got an order bigger than we've ever done before. It's hard to tell everyone to stop and refocus. So what are maybe, and we'll get to some advice here in a minute, but what other mistakes or symptoms can you walk a business owner through that they should be looking for?
Yeah, I think, especially around, I think this may be a good time to kind of introduce at least how I think about kind of the rules of growth, right? So what's going to prevent me as a business leader from chasing after the shiny objects? Because a lot of times, yes, we can sit here and in this conversation, we can clearly say,
it's easy.
Chasing after shiny objects, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. Stay focused. That's good. But to the point you just made, in the heat of battle, that gets very foggy, because your job as a leader, and most times, is to grow the business, to increase enterprise value. And to do that, you must find new revenue opportunities or business development partnerships, whatever it may be. So when you think about not chasing after shiny objects, I think you almost kind of want to think about the three rules of growth can it pass through these three filters?
Okay.
And number one, is this opportunity going to allow us to sustainably grow and scale? Anybody can go out there and chase this one thing or spend a bunch of money on advertising and get kind of a sugar high of a pop maybe in business, right? But
Yeah.
what happens when that sugar high runs out? Are we going to experience a hangover, or is that going to keep propelling us with some, lack of a better term, some escape velocity? Number two, does it create operating leverage? And for this one, I really want to double click on it because I think this is another common trap that I see is, if every dollar of revenue growth has a matching dollar of expense to get it, I've got bad news for you. You're not scaling the business. That's just treading water.
Yeah.
And so ideally, we want to look for those growth opportunities that makes everything else easier. It allows us to benefit from the economies of scale. It maybe further leverages the existing cost basis that we have, not adding cost to go find new growth. And then third, arguably the most important, because I've learned this the hard way, is to never grow faster than your ability to manage it. There's a good reason that Facebook moved away from their early mantra of move fast and break things, because as they started to grow, the things that were breaking, were really painful. And all of a sudden they spent more time fixing the broke things than they were on growing and optimizing the business. And so if you're growing faster than your ability to manage it, at some point that car is going to hit the wall and you're going to have to reverse course to get the foundation and the structure back in place to manage it.
So Aaron, we are very lucky to have some really smart people come on here and talk. And you are the third or the fourth person, man, I'm going to say in the last couple recordings we've had that have said, grow slow, manage your growth. Don't just let it overrun you. So there's got to be something to it because, there's you're a smart guy, and there's lots of other smart people that have come and said the same thing. So maybe that's the big takeaway. You grow slow, manage your growth. Sometimes we'll take that kind of, if we could get this deal, it would give us that extra equity or cash flow or whatever to buy a new piece of equipment or to get into that market. And then it's because it's new, it takes your people are already, working at or near capacity, if not beyond capacity in some situations. Mm-hmm. And to draw them away from your core offering to do something the same but different can really hurt the business, because all that core business, those repeat customers, that momentum you've created, you divert over to do something as an experiment on maybe this could be great for us. We're not sure. And it ends up hurting the real business. And it doesn't turn out to be anything. So now you've taken a step back by taking a project on. Sometimes it'll actually, your business will take the hit and you'll go backwards because you'll end up, maybe a project goes out late, or you don't have the manpower to go service a really good client when they call you in need. And you're like, we can't do it. We have this brand new client that we got to take care of, even though you've been with us for 5 years, but we just can't do it right now. That's not the best way to grow. And sometimes saying no is the best answer, right? The deal you don't take is the best deal.
I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. Now, I say this to every business I work with, regardless of industry, that focus will always be a superpower to any business. And the best way to manage or track how focused you are is by how many things you're saying no to that falls outside of a predetermined priority scope. And maybe this is fresh on my mind after watching the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholders meeting this weekend. But Warren Buffett has an excellent quote about this. And he says, the difference between average companies and really, really great companies is that really, really great companies say no to virtually everything. They're so clear on who they are, where they generate value, with whom they can deliver the most value to from a customer segment, that they're so focused that it becomes ultra clear on things that kind of that are just opportunities that start to fall on the peripheral. It's easy no decisions because of how focused they are.
Right.
And I think it's counterintuitive for a lot of small businesses who I think we've all kind of been trained or read. There's so many books around hyper scaling, hyper growth, this and that, when in reality, sustainable growth always, and when I say always, underline it, put an exclamation point behind it, always beats rapid expansion.
So can we is there a caveat here? I'm a business owner. I'm listening. I'm like, look, I'm at $5 million and I got the responsibility to pay my employees and put food on the table. And we're not established enough yet. And I don't have the cash on hand or the cash flow to not turn down deals. I think in the beginning, you have to find that core business. So you take on a lot to see what you can do. This is kind of, I think, what most business owners experience. And then you start specializing. Maybe my question is that a feasible thing to do when you're starting out, or you're in that first stage of, we got to get established, we got to get some cash flow, we got to take care of our people, I got to make sure I can open the doors tomorrow and the week after and the month after that?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to a big question that I think every business should ask and ask themselves frequently. And that is, what are we optimizing for? And what I found by helping businesses not only ask this question, but sit with it and wrestle with the question. Because growth is by far and away the natural default to solving problems, right? Whether it's a cash flow problem, a profitability problems, like everybody's answer to just about every business issue or problem is to grow more.
Right.
And so I always like to just help leaders zoom out and say, but what are we really optimizing for? And normally what comes out of those optimization sessions is the growth they are going after, that shiny object they're chasing, that opportunity they just feel they can't say no to. They're hoping and wishing has some outcome attached to it. And typically, it's not necessarily revenue growth. It's usually something more downstream, whether it's profitability or cash flow. And so when you can get an understanding of what are we optimizing for, what is the true bottom line metric, outcome, desired end result that we're looking for, it helps you re-optimize. Do I chase that to get this? Or it's adding context around not only what you're chasing, but why you're chasing it.
Okay.
Because if that customer comes in and yes, there may be revenue attached to it, but you're not optimized in any way, shape, or form to be able to generate profitability from that revenue, you have to be able to call a spade and say, yes, that revenue may come in, but it may actually increase our burn rate by going after and chasing that revenue. And so if you don't know at a foundational level what you're trying to optimize the business for, it's hard to have the right filters to know this is a good opportunity or this is a bad opportunity.
Got it. That's a good point. All right, let's move into some advice. So other than calling you, and we'll get to your contact information here in a minute, but what are the top 3 to 5 pieces of advice you could give a business owner out there thinking like, okay, I'm in this chaos cycle. A lot of what I'm hearing is ringing true. How do I get out of this? How do I get back on track?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, first and foremost, where I see a lot of the chaos getting developed is there's a major disconnect between maybe a longer or medium term vision and short term priorities. And so I like to offer the challenge to businesses is making sure that whatever system they want to use, but making sure that they understand if this is where we want to be from a 12-month standpoint, always work backwards from that. So if this is where we want to be by the end of the year, make sure the team clearly understands where we need to be halfway through the year. So by the end of month June, this is where we need to be on track for that. Work backwards from that. So if this is where you need to be in 6 months, what needs to be true? What needs to be achieved in the first quarter for you to be on track for that 6-month milestone? So to use another analogy, you've probably learned by now that I'm a big analogy guy. It's, look, when you make the decision to go try and climb Mount Everest, you don't just start at the bottom and try to summit as fast as possible. You go through a series of base camps to reacclimate, to get adjusted, to develop the game plan on now how to move to the next base camp. And so I think for a lot of business strategies, I see a lack of that working backwards and creating digestible, shorter term milestones that are clearly aligned and connected to that more longer term strategy that is transparent and in place within the business. That's the quickest way for chaos to be developed in the organization or for your employees to feel like, hey, priorities are always shifting or changing. And it's because you don't have short-term priorities clearly aligned with a long-term stated mission that is that link. Without that connecting link, everything's going to sound like a good opportunity. To the point you just made, every new revenue potential that shows up on the doorstep is something that we feel we should chase after because there's no system in place to make sure that we understand, does this move us closer to that vision or does this actually take us in a completely on a completely different mountain?
Yeah.
And so I think, I like to use, because a lot of businesses are done from an annual planning standpoint. And while longer term multi-year goals are great, there's not a whole lot of actionable things you can do with them, right? And so I like to use that 12-6-3 kind of protocol is, where do you want to be in 12 months? Where do you need to be on track for that at the 6-month mark? And then what needs to be our quarterly prioritization focus to be on track to that next 6-month base camp, so to speak. And so connect it for your organization, because when more and more people within a business understand those links and how this base camp leads to the next one, the world becomes clearer for not just you or your leadership team, but for everyone in the business.
Very cool. Any other pieces of advice you could offer?
I think it's
wrap it all up there.
Yeah, I think it's something else that is just a double click on what we've been talking about is, so many companies are so revenue focused that they think if the revenue shows up, everything else takes care of itself. And so I just want to use this as a reminder that it's not about how much revenue you're generating, it's how much of that revenue actually falls to the bottom line.
Right.
And as the quote goes, revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, and cash is always king. And so if you keep that, if you have one thing to do when you walk away from this conversation, is write those words down on a Post-it note and stick it on your monitor or on your wall, to always make sure that does the revenue you're generating follow into that waterfall effect, because revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, cash is king. So does your revenue give you an opportunity to convert that revenue into cash for the business, which is always going to be the oxygen? So make sure your revenue is able to be converted into oxygen, which is cash in the business.
Right. Very cool. Aaron, this has been amazing. Great information. I think there's a lot of takeaways here. If anyone's listening and they're thinking, man, I'd like to talk to Aaron, or I'm living in the Austin area, or I'm sure you work all over the country.
Yeah.
but we want to reach out and learn more, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, 2 steps to do that. The first step, go on LinkedIn. Let's connect. I'm happy to answer any and all questions. I'm always publishing some type of value add content on a day in, day out basis. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I want it to be a high leverage activity for you where you're always learning and able to get more information that could positively impact your business. And to get a deeper dive into what it's like to understand working with me, how I work with clients, what operating system I use, you can always go to my website, which is performancemindsetcoaching.co. Those are the 2 places that I show up to most. And if you follow those 2 steps, I think you'll have all the information you could possibly need right there at your fingertips.
Very cool. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me, Corey.
No worries. Next time I'm in Austin, I'll look you up if you want to grab lunch, or if you don't. There it is, Aaron Trahan from Performance Mindset Coaching. Some really good information. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of today's episode and you want to keep up to date on our new content, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment, forward it, share it with your friends. Let us know what topics you want us to talk about. We are here to help you. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can check us out on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen on. Just search up KeyHire Small Business Podcast and we'll show up. I'd like to thank you for listening today. I'm Corey Harlock, and until next time, stop grinding, start growing.